Today I am reading from the seventh book in the Left Behind series. I am reading the book called The Indwelling, and I'm going to be reading chapter 15 today. And I'll begin to read now. Buck struggled to open his eyes. He had never felt so beat up. The dawn sun peeked through the blinds in a small infirmary. He wasn't sure where. He had awakened to the quiet praying of three men who sat holding hands. One he recognized as Lucas Miklos. The others were a tall, dark haired man about his own age and an older, smaller Middle Easterner. "How are you feeling, my friend?" Lucas said, approaching. "I've been better, Laszlos, but you're a sight. Where are we, and how is Chaim?" Lucas stepped closer and whispered, "Chaim will be all right, but we had to come up with an alias for him. His nose was severely damaged and his jaw broken, so he has not spoken, and medical personnel are not suspicious, only curious. He is being operated on right now. Our document forger pulled off the impossible, and our pilot is gone, right? I wasn't hallucinating." "That is correct. Praise God he was a believer. His papers identified him as Tyrola Mark Delanty. Was this an alias or didn't need an alias? He ran a small airport near us and was able to evade suspicious eyes." Laszlos nodded. "The GC will not allow bodies to be transported internationally. Let our church handle the burial." Buck rolled his shoulders and rotated his head. Pain shot through his neck. "What's your guy going to do about Chaim's picture?" Lucas looked over his shoulder. "Look what we planted after surgery." He showed Buck an ID with the photograph nearly scraped off, a bit of white hair peeking through the top. "Doesn't that look like it went through the crash?" "We tried to persuade officials to postpone surgery until the swelling reduced, but they're short-staffed here, like everywhere. Meanwhile, he's Tobias Rogoff, a retired librarian from Gaza on his way to North America on a charter flight, the same one you're on. Does he know this?" "We told him a few hours ago. Our story is that the charter insurance company has contracted with Albi Air to guarantee the completion of the trip as soon as you two are airworthy." "I'm airworthy now," Buck said, looking over Laszlo's shoulder toward the little Middle Easterner. "You must be, Albi." "I am, sir," he said with a thick accent and a slight bow. "Your father-in-law and your friend Mr. McCollum and I go way back. Also Abdullah Smith." "How well I know. I did not expect to see your mark. Is your father-in-law aware?" Albie shook his head. "This was very recent, within the week. I tried to contact Rayford, and I found him impossible to connect with. Of course, now I know why." "And how did you come to faith, sir?" "Nothing dramatic, I'm afraid. I have always been religious, but Rayford and Mac and Abdullah all urged me to at least consider the writings of Dr. Ben Judah. Finally, I did. You know what reached me? His assessment of the difference between religion and Christianity." "I know it well," Buck said, "if you're referring to his contention that religion is man's attempt to reach God, while Jesus is God's attempt to reach man." "The very argument," Albie said. "I spent a couple of days surfing the archives of Dr. Ben Judah's website, saw all his explanations of the prophesied plagues and judgments, then studied the prophecies about the coming Christ. How anyone with a functioning mind could read that and not—" "Forgive me, Albie," Laszlo said, "but we must keep moving. We should tell you, Buck, that Dr. Rosenzweig's eyes danced at the prospect of a new identity. We don't know how long it will be before he can speak, but it's clear he can't wait to play act as someone else." Buck slid off the side of the bed. "Are we near the airport?" Laszlo shook his head. "We're north of Kazani. Albie has flown the new craft to Potomac, and when you and Tobias are healthy, you'll leave from there. Meanwhile, as soon as we can get you out of here, You'll stay with us at the same safe house where we harbored Rayford. We have not met, Buck said, reaching past Laszlo's hand to shake hands with the tall, willowy one. I'm sorry, Laszlo said, Pastor Demeter. The pastor said, Mr. Williams, I answered your phone a while ago and talked to your wife. She and your father-in-law are checking out a new safe house. And she was very relieved to hear that you and Chame are alive. Naturally, they are distraught over Mr. Delanty, particularly Rayford. Mr. Williams wants to talk with you as soon as you are able. Or Mrs. Williams wants to talk with you as soon as you are able. I want to get home soon, Buck said. Albie, I'll bet you weren't planning on flying that far, were you? I have nothing to return to Albazra for, Mr. Williams. Could you use another craft and another pilot? Oh, I think the Tribulation Force might find room for the best black market contact in the world. Demetrius handed Buck his phone. As Buck dialed, Laszlo's explained that so far they had not seemed to arouse suspicion on the parts of the local GC. They believe Demetrius works for me and that you are an American come to study the business. Chloe didn't like the plan. Get out of there, Buck, she told him. We've found the perfect safe house. Even my comedian father hopes so. Chame is smart, but this clandestine stuff is not his game. Let us get you two healthy here. You may be right, Chloe, he said. What time is it there? I've got to call my dad. She paused. Buck, it's after 8 in the evening and earlier out west, but that was one of the reasons I wanted to talk with you. He read it in her voice. Dad, yes, and your brother too. Buck, I'm sorry. How? GC. Looking for us? That's what we understand. But they didn't know where we are. That's why I never told them. I know, sweetheart. There may be some good news too. What? Our source tells us that the first attempt to get information out of them had to be postponed. They were at church. Chloe, don't. It's true, Buck. Leah found a believer at Buffer who has access to those schemes, and she says that's from a reliable source. Why wouldn't Dad have told me? Maybe the timing wasn't right. I wish I could have known for sure. Leah is trying to reach the church so they know what happened and can be on guard. She'll ask for the truth about your dad and brother. Rayford had to stop driving when news came of T's death. He walked a couple of blocks in the darkness, and when Chloe asked if she could walk with him, he thanked her but added, I need a few minutes, hon. Chicago was, naturally, a mess. Buildings in piles, rotting carcasses, vehicles crashed or burned. It seemed an appropriate ambience for Rayford's sojourn. The hardest thing about living during this period, he decided, was the roller coaster of emotions. He would never get used to the shock of loss and the necessity to telescope mourning into minute slivers so it could be dealt with and yet one could go on with the business at hand. In the past, with each death of someone close to him, Rayford had rehearsed the ever-growing list in his mind. He didn't do that anymore. He wondered if a person had a limit, some finite reservoir of grief that would eventually peter out and leave him with no tears, no regret, no melancholy. He stopped at what was once a corner and leaned over, hands on his knees. His grief supply was still stocked, and the pain of the loss gushed from him. Hard as it was, Rayford had to condense the bereavement caused by yet another aching amputation into a few brief hours. He was not allowed to dwell on it, to jot his memories, to console a widow, to break the news to a congregation. There would be no wake, no funeral, not even a memorial service at the rate they were going. T's church was likely to have one, of course, but there was no way Rayford dared attend. Who knew who might be watching, lying in wait? Not enough of his comrades in the Tribulation Force really knew T. They would be like reminiscing. He was gone. They would see him in heaven. Now what was next on the crisis docket? It was unfair, unnatural. How was a person supposed to function this way and stay sane? Rayford was grateful for his own return to what Dr. Benjuda liked to call the first love of Christ. that wonderful season when the plan of salvation and the truth of grace are fresh and new. He was thankful for the counsel of Demetrius Demeter and the refreshing rest and new sense of resolve he enjoyed. And now this, the thrill ride. He'd had enough ups for 24 hours, apparently. He had been due for some downs. As usual, when in a stretch like this, Rayford tried cataloging what he still had to be thankful for. Without fail, every blessing in his life had a name attached. Chloe, Kenny, Buck, Tyson, Leah, her new friend he hadn't yet met, the two Zeeks, Chaim, David and Annie, Mac, Abdullah, Laszlos and his wife, Demetrius, Albie. Rayford wondered why Albie had been so eager to help in Greece and what it was he was so eager to tell him, but only in person. Rayford had to fight the knowledge that while his list might expand, it also had to suffer attrition. He had already lost so many, including 2 wives. He would not allow himself to think about losing more relatives. When he returned to the Rover, Leah reported that she had reached the leader of the house church Buck's father and brother had attended. I told him I'd love it if he could talk directly to Buck, and he said he'd be happy to, but I didn't feel right about giving out Buck's number. That was wise, Rayford said. Let Buck decide that. His phone is secure, but this pastor's is likely bugged if they just had a GC cleansing. Try Buck and give him the pastor's number. Let him work out the contact. A few minutes later, Rayford parked near Strong's, and they cased the place only to find it secure. The 3 of them sat on the sidewalk with their backs to the cold brick, and Rayford pulled out his phone. Something about the New Babylon pre-dawn David never liked. Maybe Israel was lusher, both with desert areas. But the hour before daybreak in Israel had always invigorated him, made him look forward to the promise of the day. The dry, windless heat of New Babylon mornings, beautiful as the sunrises could be, David found suffocating. Watching Guy Blod put the finishing touches on the huge image of Nikolai Carpathia did little to cheer David. Not 100 feet away, hundreds of thousands of grieving pilgrims from all over the world moved in slow silence, waiting hours for their few seconds before the sarcophagus. It was sad enough, these blind, lost, misled minions, clearly worried about their future due to the loss of their beloved leader. But here, behind great curtains, Guy and his assistants over the finished product. Care to look close? Guy asked David as he glided down on the motorized scaffold. Not really, David wanted to say, but how would he explain passing on such a so-called privilege? He shrugged, which Guy interpreted as affirmative, and the sculptor sang out instructions. There's only room for 1 on the scaffold, and you have to run the controls yourself. Be careful. The first time I did it, I nearly knocked over one of my own creations. Guy showed David the controls, which consisted primarily of a joystick and speed selector. He was tempted to point the thing at the statue's head, shoot up, and knock it over. As David tentatively and jerkily practiced maneuvering the scaffold before rising, Guy hollered his cautions. Careful of the smoke. The fire is lit under the knees, and the face has the only exhaust. Why didn't you wait until it was in place to start the fire? We don't want to distract the crowds. This sort of art is a duet between sculptor and viewer, and my goal is that they participate in the illusion that the statue is alive. 24 feet high and made of metal. Trust me, this works. People will love it. But it would spoil everything if they saw us dumping in the stuff for the fire. What are you using for fuel? David asked. A form of shale, Guy said, for kindling, onion skin paper. Where did that come from? Every tribe and nation, Guy said, and his people laughed. Seriously, we have an unlimited supply of holy books from all over the world. The last contribution of the late Pontifex Maximus, he shipped from Rome all the holy texts that had been confiscated and donated from the various religions and sects when the one world faith was established. David was repulsed. Now certain he didn't want the closer look, but he was stuck. Note the handiwork on the way up, Guy said. What was there to see but polished black iron? You can touch, but be careful, it's delicately balanced. Nearly 2.5 stories up, David could hardly hear Guy anymore. Smoke wafted out the eyes, nostrils, and mouth of the quadruple sized image of Carpathia. It was uncanny, though from that close the illusion was lost that the eyes were real. The features, having been made from an actual cast of the body, were perfect replicas. David was high enough to see past the statue to the horizon, where the sun's pinks were just beginning to wash the sky. Suddenly he flinched and backpedaled, hitting the safety bar just above his waist. The whole scaffold shuddered, and he feared it might topple. Hey, one of Guy's assistants hollered. What's going on up there? Guy yelled. You all right? David waved. He didn't want to admit what he had heard, what had made him jump. He steadied himself and listened, a low rumble echoing as if from the belly of the image. Muffled and sonorous, it was clearly Carpathia's timbre. What was it saying, and how had they gotten it to do that? A chip, a disc player, a tape? He felt the vibration again, heard the hum, cocked his head to listen. I shall shed the blood of saints and prophets. David whipped the control so the scaffold lurched down about 5 feet and stopped, swaying again. How did you do that? He called down. Do what? Get a recording in there. Silence. Well, how did you? Where's the hardware, and what does the phrase mean? Guy was still staring up at him, obviously holding out. Guy! What? What didn't you hear? Do I have to repeat everything? What didn't I hear? I didn't hear anything but you, David. What the devil are you talking about? David began his slow descent. The thing talks. How did you do it? Tape, loop, disc, what? And won't the heat or smoke destroy it? Guy rolled his eyes at his people. He whispered, What are you, serious? You know, blamed. Well, I'm serious, Guy. So we're back to first names, are we? Can we not get hung up on that right now? Minister, director, potent, take your choice, Blod. The thing speaks. I heard it twice, and I'm not crazy. If you're not crazy, you're mistaken. Don't tell me I didn't hear what I heard. Then you're hearing things, Director Hasid. This thing hasn't been out of my sight since the shell was delivered. This isn't a theme park. I don't want giant talking action figures, okay? Are we all right now? May I have them start moving my big boy into position? David nodded and stepped back to let a monstrous forklift move in behind the statue. His phone chirped, and as soon as he answered, he heard a tone indicating another call. This is David Hasid. Hold, please. But as he punched in the other call heard Dave and recognized Fortunato's voice. This is Director Hasid. Hold, please, he said again, switching back to Fortunato. Sorry, Commander. I'm watching the moving of the statue, and I'm sure that'll succeed without you, David. I'd appreciate not being put on hold in the future. David knew he should apologize again to keep up appearances, but he was dwelling on how important his getting up before 5 a.m. was to Fortunato last night and how incidental it was now. We've got a situation here, Leon continued. I need you in the conference room on 18 as soon as possible. Anything I need to bring or be thinking about? No? Well, yes, Captain McCullum's schedule. Oh, he's... Tell me when you get here, David. Quickly, please. David switched to his other call. That busy, that early, huh, kid? Rayford said. Sorry, what's up? David walked backwards as he talked, watching the statue emerge from the preparation room and become visible to the crowds. The murmuring grew louder as people nudged each other and pointed. The statue leaned back against the forks of the truck, and not until it came into the beams of the spotlights did it become apparent to all that it was, as Guy had so delicately put it, au naturel. Oohs and ahs rose from the crowd. Then they began applauding and soon cheering. What in the world is going on there? Rayford said. David told him. I think they've waited so long to see the body that they would worship trading cards if we passed them out. Rayford told David what had happened in Greece. I'm so sorry, Captain Steele. I only talked to Mr. Delante a few times by phone, and I know you two were close. This is a hard one, David. They don't get any easier. Sometimes I feel like an albatross. The people who get close to me are soon gone. David told him he was on his way to a mysterious meeting, and they debriefed each other again on what had happened at the gala. No matter what they say, sir, it's clear the shooting was accidental and that the bullet totally missed Carpathia. That doesn't make me any less of a scapegoat, but oh, Captain, wait a second. I hear the crowd. What happened? Oh man, it almost toppled over. They set down the statue and it rocked forward. People are diving out of the way. The forklift guy moved up to sort of catch it on its way back so it wouldn't fall that way, and that just made it rock forward again. I don't know how it didn't go over. It's settled now, and they're nudging it straight. Oh man, he told Rayford of the built in furnace, but said nothing about what he heard. That jostling must have stoked the fire because the smoke is really pouring out now. You know they're burning Bibles among other holy books in there. No. Sir, I'm heading inside now, and I never asked what you called about. I'm at the new safe house, David. Yeah, how is it? It looks fabulous, but we have one problem. It must look automatically in emergencies. It must lock automatically in emergencies. We can't get in. Can you unlock it from there? David was near the elevator. I can't talk here, sir, so let me just say yes. I'll get to that as soon as the meeting is over. I wish I could say when that will be. Tyson took a call from Chloe informing him it was likely they would be back very late. Any evidence of GC nosing around? None, he said, but he did not add that he had been 93 million miles from Mount Prospect for at least 2 minutes. She spoke briefly to Kenny, who kept wanting to pull the phone from his mouth and see Mama. Finally, he said, Love you too. See ya later. Bye-bye. Tyson, I appreciate this more than you know, Chloe said. He's easy, he said, and you know I love him. She told Tyson what to feed Kenny and to put him to bed at 9. Much as he had enjoyed the baby, that was good news. Kenny often slept through the night. David had not given himself time to worry what the big meeting was about. He just hoped he would not be in there alone with Fortunato. David was the last to arrive. A dozen directors and above were there, including television personnel, most yawning and rubbing their eyes. Let's get started, people, Leon began. We have a crisis. No one is leaving New Babylon. Despite the decimation population in the last 3.5 years, hotels are jammed and people are even agreeing to double up. 2 whole families in each room. Others are sleeping in the street, under lean-tos. The airport is crowded with big jets. They bring in capacity loads for the viewing, but they're canceling most outbound flights for lack of interest. You know what's happening, don't you? The viewing is not meeting their felt needs, a woman said. David recognized her as Hilda Schnell, head of Global Community Cable News Network. I'm glad it was you who answered, Hilda, Leon said. We need your help. What can I do? I'm staying for the funeral, too. We were not prepared for this size crowd, Leon said. This will be twice as large as the Jerusalem gala. Hilda said, I still don't understand how CNN can help. Even at the gala, we merely... Bear with me, Leon said. As you know, we already pushed back the funeral and burial to accommodate the crowds. We assume that 1 million or so people will still be waiting to view the body by the time we were ready for the ceremony. With more than 3 million here already, another estimated million on their way, and virtually no one leaving, we have to regroup. Where are the big screens we used in Jerusalem, and do we have more? Someone from event programming said they were in storage in New Babylon and that they would be enough, supplemented by smaller monitors, to handle the larger crowd. But, he added, that will require a lot of man hours and, of course, a layout scheme. The way the courtyard is quartered off now will certainly not handle a crowd that size, especially if the ones who have already passed by the buyer stay for the funeral, and I can't imagine why they're still in the city if that is not their plan. My point exactly, Leon said. I already have engineers on the new schematic. And let me be clear, laborers are starting to rearrange barricades, chairs, crowd control ropes, and so forth. All this work will go on with no interruption of the viewing process. If the line has to be moved, that should be able to be done in an orderly fashion without stopping the procession. My question for you, Ms. Schnell, is whether your equipment can feed that many monitors. Some people naturally will be hundreds of yards from the podium. We don't worry about that, Commander, Ms. Schnell said. We concern ourselves with providing the best visual and audio coverage of the event for television and leave it to your event organizers to make it work for their purposes. Leon stared at her, expressionless. What I am suggesting, madam, is that you do worry about it. We have singers, dancers, speakers, and the like to make this ceremony appropriate, not only to the occasion and the size of the large live crowd, but also to the stature of the one we honor. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Just tell us what you want, sir. Thank you. Thank you for the privilege. Now, Fortunato was smiling. That the big screens from Jerusalem are already here. Director Hasid eliminates my needs for one of your pilots to go get them. If we would make use of your entire hangar crew, cargo staff, pilots, and all, in crowd control, I would appreciate it. Viv Evans will be coordinating that, so let her know how many are available and who they are. The new times for the ceremony and burial are noon at 2 o'clock today, respectively. Some dignitary speeches may be shortened, but those times are firm and may be announced effective immediately. Ms. Schnell, I'm assuming this event supersedes all other programming so that the entire globe may participate, including those who reach the airport in time to watch on television but too late to be here in person. She nodded. David fidgeted, knowing Rayford, Chloe, and Leo were waiting to get into the Strong building. He wasn't certain he could remotely unlock a door, but he'd rather have been studying that than sitting through a logistics meeting. Fortunato soon left the details in the hands of his engineers, and David hurried out. On the way to his office, he saw the laborers already at work refashioning the massive courtyard into a fiesta that would accommodate the expected flood of humanity. According to the snatches of news reports he caught on the monitors lining the hallways of the palace complex, Leon was right. People of every ethnic background were interviewed at the airport, in line, and on the streets. Nearly every person expressed a desire to attend the funeral, even if they had already passed by the body. This was the greatest man who ever lived, a Turkish man said through an interpreter. The world will never see another like him. It is the worst tragedy we will ever face, and we can only hope that his successor will be able to carry on the ideas he put forth. Do you believe Nikolai Carpathia was divine in any sense? The reporter said. In every sense, the man said. I believe it's possible that he was the Messiah the Jews longed for all these centuries, and he was murdered in their own nation, just as the scriptures prophesied. As David settled in behind his computer in the privacy of his office, he left on the TV monitor hanging from the ceiling in the corner. GCCNN had followed that interview with a live feed from Israel, where thousands were listening to enthusiastic preachers running forward, falling on their knees, and then shouting of their new allegiance to Jesus the Messiah. The Jerusalem correspondent had with her a religious expert who attempted to explain. In the vacuum created by the deaths of both the head of the one world faith and the supreme potentate of the global community, whom many considered every bit as much a religious as a political figure, spiritually hungry people are rushing to fill the gap, longing for leadership and be rid of one man who seemed to fit the bill. They now find attractive this fairly recent craze of ascribing to the historical figure of Jesus the Christ the qualifications of the Messiah Israel has waited so long. This phenomenon existed in small pockets of conservative fundamentalist Christian sections, but was fueled shortly after the vanishings of Dr. Tyson Ben Judah, an Israeli biblical scholar. He had been commissioned by the state of Israel to clarify the prerequisites of the prophesied Messiah for the modern Jew. Dr. Ben Judah created an uproar, particularly among Jews, when at the end of the live, globally televised airing of his views, he announced that Jesus the Christ was the only person in history to fulfill all the messianic prophecies, and that the vanishings were evidence that he had already come. David was impressed that the expert, while clearly not agreeing with what was going on, had an accurate handle of the issue. Having studied under Tyson on the net for so long, David knew that his further outbreak of evangelism in Israel would also spawn many more false Christs and second-rate antichrists. Dr. Ben Judah had often cited Matthew 24:21 through 24 in urging his followers, now referred to as Judahites, to beware. For then there will be great tribulation, such as has not been since the beginning of the world. Until this time, no, nor ever shall be. And unless those days were shortened, no flesh will be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened. Then if anyone says to you, look, here is the Christ, or there, do not believe it. For false Christs and false prophets will rise and show great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. By now, David was deep into the inner workings of the strong building. While worrying through the many security pass gates using code breakers of his own design, he had a phone tucked between his cheek and shoulder. Captain Steele, he said, if I can do this, I'm going to get you in through one of the parking garage's inner doors. The gates will be down, but you can walk around those and get to the elevators. We were that far, Rayford said. The glass doors leading to the elevators are the ones we need open. We could break the glass, but we're afraid that would set off an alarm. Who'd hear it? I know, but usually those kinds of alarms are attached to all sorts of interrelated devices, like at the airport. You force your way through the wrong door and certain systems automatically shut down. Bingo, David said. Excuse me? You're in. We're not even on that side of the building. We'll get there, David said. I can't wait to hear what you find. Listen, good news. The designers of this building did two very nice things, as if they knew we were coming. First, the electrical panel room and the telephone room, both of which are traditionally on the top floor or even above in some spire, are located on the first floor, one up from where you'll enter. Second, I think I have detected why the structure is so sound below where the bomb damage is. The blueprints show what's called a closure for stack effect every 15 floors or so. It happens that there is just such a closure one floor beneath where the bomb damage occurred. This closure acts as a new roof for the building. I'm not certain yet, but you may be able to land a helicopter there. If you can deal with the complications of a three-sided opening above that. Helicopter, Rayford said. We're in the garage, by the way. I can see you. You can? See the monitor up in the corner to your right? The three waved at David, and he almost waved back, forgetting this was not a two-way visual feed. Yep, I see you. The door directly in front of you should be unlocked. And yes, I said helicopter before. Where am I going to get one of those? I don't know, David said. Know anybody in purchasing anywhere? We also need to start thinking about a new air base closer to here. Different anyway. We have no friends at Pawaki anymore. How was Kankakee? Might work. How about we have Albie set up there as a small private transport company, maybe serving Laszlo's, who's still considered legit by the GC. Then we can come and go as we please out of there with no questions asked, and we can chopper our way up here when we need to. I like the way you think, Captain Steele. I like the options you provide, David. I'll try to keep track of you floor by floor with the various monitors, David said, but I may have to leave you abruptly too. You know where I am. Leah and Chloe appeared to be working well together. Though David could hear only Rayford, he could see the women checking out site angles from various windows. Leah wants to talk with you, David. Here she is. You're looking at blueprints. Online, he said. Yeah. Am I seeing this right? Are we not visible from the street, at least where we are now? Affirmative. And what if we turn on lights? That I wouldn't do. What if we spray painted the windows black? And that is the end of chapter 15. Next, I'll be reading chapter 16. Thank you for joining me and have a wonderful day.